Hello friends, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So friends, today we are going to do a podcast with Subhrajoyti Sir. He is a Google developer expert and having 7+ year experience as an Android developer. So we are going to learn a lot of things, and we are also going to discuss about KMM, Kotlin Multiplatform. So we can know like how we can go with the KMM, what is the benefit of it. Also we are going to discuss about Jetpack Compose, advanced Android development things, like how we can become advanced Android developers. Also we are going to discuss about his journey, like how he started and become a GDE, Google Developer Expert of Android. So we are going to learn a lot of things. So friends, let's start the amazing video, and welcome to Subhrajoyti Sir to our channel. Welcome sir on our YouTube channel, and let's start this video with a brief introduction about you.
Sure. So I'm Subhrajoyti and I'm a software engineer at this company called Motive. We do hardware, software and a bunch of other things for fleets in the US and Canada. And I'm also a Google Developer Expert for Android, and I've been doing Android for about 6-7 years now.
Okay, so like here we are going to get a good experience from sir. We are going to mostly ask about the new technologies that is coming in Android development, like KMM. So we can, using that, we can develop application in all the platform. So sir, let's start with a brief introduction of KMM, like what is it and how we can start it.
Okay. So if you think of cross-platform development, it's mostly if you think about things like Flutter, React Native, where your UI is shared as well. Like everything that you write is shared. You have one code base which exports to apps for different platforms. With KMM, the thing is you are sharing anything not related to the UI. So any of your business logic, any common logic that you have, all of it will be shared. So for example, if you do networking, if you do API calls, your API calls are the same on Android as well as on iOS. You just use a different language and different libraries. So with KMM, a lot of this code can become common. So if you want to do storage, networking and a bunch of other things, all that logic can be written once in Kotlin, and then you can have different targets. So it can be iOS, it could be macOS,
Windows,
or Android. So you can have these different targets, and Kotlin will, KMM will take care of exporting the correct versions for each of your targets. But you write the code base mostly once, and you can also use platform-specific libraries. For example, you want to use separate libraries for one purpose on Android and on iOS. You can have a common interface defined, and then you can have platform-specific implementations.
Okay, so like for the UI part, we have to write the specific code for Android, iOS.
Yes. So the idea behind KMM is to make sure that anything non-UI you are able to do it. Of course, you can do common UI like multi-platform compose as well, but that's not what we mainly target in KMM. So you do your UIs natively, so it could be Android views or compose, and Swift UI or something else on your iOS apps.
Okay, and sir, let's talk about like mostly people go for the Flutter for cross development. So what is the difference between the Flutter and the KMM, like on the basis of performance and on the basis of code?
I would say the primary difference is you're not sharing the entire thing. On KMM, you're sharing non-UI code, and on Flutter, everything is almost shared. So you're writing once and getting the UI for different platforms, but with KMM, that's not what we target. The main difference you would notice is that since you're writing things very natively, you do get the performance benefit, where you're not loading any sort of an extra engine to render things on different platforms, but everything that you write actually gets converted to native code. So if you were to write an iOS app, you would get code native to that platform, and similarly for Android. And the added benefit is if you're an Android developer, you already know Kotlin, so you don't need to know another language, and you're very familiar with the tooling. Everything happens inside Android Studio. It's a very familiar environment, especially for an Android developer. And with the similarity in Swift and Kotlin in a lot of places, it becomes easy for iOS developers to also adopt KMM.
I think Netflix is developed on the KMM.
Yeah, so I would say for companies as big as Netflix, they would have a mix of everything. You might not know that some pages they might use Flutter or different depending on use cases. But in terms of switch, it's also about what the company wants to do, like company or individual developing the app, what's their intention as well. So if you are a startup, for example, who wants to push out the app quite fast, even with KMM, you're still doing your UI twice. They might prefer Flutter because it's easy to go to market with that, like launch the first version of your app, get users. So if you see, if there's recently an app called Blue Sky, if I'm not wrong, and they used, I think, React Native because it gave them the speed to launch the app fast. KMM, on the other hand, becomes helpful if you have two native apps and you want to get some commonality between them and start sharing code. That way, KMM becomes very useful.
And here we are also get the performance and also I think we can get the better security on KMM.
Yeah, since everything is native, you get a better control of things and you're too reliant on third-party libraries.
Okay, and in future, what will be better, like Flutter or the KMM, if we can discuss about it?
Sure. So there is no specific answer to that. It will, both have their own places and both will evolve. We have seen how fast Flutter has developed over the years, like the rate at which it has caught up, the difference in performance they have made, like initially how the performance was versus right now, and how they're pushing more and more Flutter. Flutter recently, there's a company that recently came up with something like code push for Flutter. So each will have its own place, depending upon how the companies want to move or what's the target, what they already have. Because if you have native apps to completely move to Flutter, it's a very big journey. But to start KMM, it's a couple of weeks to a couple of months of journey and you start getting benefits there. So both will have their own places. Different companies will have different requirements. Some might want to do something very specific in native, so they might go one way. So both have their place, and I would say it's only just going to get better.
Okay, and is KMM stable or not?
It's pretty stable to use right now. We have been using KMM on production for about a year now. We haven't faced any issues like from instability. The community is very, I would say, open and very collaborative. So if you face any issues, there's usually a solution by someone out there. Even if it's not there, you'll get it in a few days because everyone's so actively developing with KMM. So like from a usage standpoint, it's been very stable for us, and I know a bunch of other places that are also using KMM and they don't have complaints either in terms of stability.
Okay, sir. And if someone is Android developer, developed Android native application from 3 to 4 years, so what you will suggest, go for the KMM or go for the Flutter or React Native?
I would say, again, depending on what they're trying to achieve in that time duration. So for example, if they want to expand their horizons of understanding of how mobile technologies work or what are the different paradigms that exist, I would suggest they can learn about Flutter because you get to see how state management works there. You get an idea of how can you do something that cross-platform where you write your code once, it works on different UI engines, right? So if you want to explore all of that, get a better understanding, do explore Flutter. But if you're an Android developer who wants to start writing iOS apps, I would say start with KMM because you already have that go-ahead of understanding Gradle tooling. You know how to write Kotlin very well. So that way you can just start extracting pieces of your code into common functionality and then make iOS app use the same functionality as well. So again, like what are your goals in like the short and long term, depending on that.
Okay, sir. And what architecture be used in KMM?
Completely up to you. Just as on Android, you get a complete, I would say, flexibility of using whatever you want, be it MVVM, in some sort of MVI architecture, because everyone has their own preferences, everyone has their own needs in terms of their code base. So that way, KMM doesn't really pose that much of an, I would say, implementation constraint that you have to use this architecture. You can use any sort of architecture you want. We have been using MVVM for our apps, but it's not necessary that you have to follow the same thing. You can use a different architecture as well. It's completely up to you. You have the entire flexibility there.
So mostly people are switching from the XML to Jetpack Compose, but I think there is a lot of people who are still using XML. So what you will suggest, first move to Jetpack Compose, then move to KMM, or directly we can jump from the XML to KMM?
I would say there is no such requirement that you need to know Jetpack Compose to be able to use KMM. Personally, we are still very XML heavy. We have started using Compose, but that's only in a few screens. We are still using a lot of XML and like the view system. So that way, there is no such requirement that you need to know Jetpack Compose. If you know Jetpack Compose, some things become easier in the sense that you favor state-driven architecture. The way you write Jetpack Compose is a state drives the UI. So the entire model will be very easy to fit in if you already know Jetpack Compose. And the same paradigm you can put on the iOS side as well, where you can use Swift UI. So both the apps, the way the data flows through the UI layer will be very similar. But if that's not the case, that you're trying to do both apps and the other app is not using Swift UI, you can definitely just use views. Like there is no such constraint there, because the way it's structured is you just expose certain state from your KMM layer. It's given to the UI layer, and it's up to the UI layer to use it however they want. So if I give you a certain state, like if I give you a sealed class, you can use that sealed class state to both use a like view-based view system, or even you can use a Compose. So no such restriction.
Okay, so we can use both, like Jetpack Compose and XML both together.
Yeah, there are no issues there at all.
Okay. Also, sir, I gone through your LinkedIn profile and I saw about a DSL, like a domain specific language. So I want to know more about it.
So DSL again as a concept is very agnostic of like languages. So it's not that it's a very Kotlin specific thing. DSL is mostly any language that is particular to a domain. So if you think of HTML, the way it's for web, like how it's structured. If you think, if you use a lot of APIs, like for example, if you think of Jetpack Compose, there's a certain sort of hierarchy to it. There is this language where there's a composable, and a lot of composables give you a trailing lambda. So you can think of DSLs as that way, that Kotlin, because of extension functions and the way you can write lambdas, it allows you to write DSLs, but then DSL is not a very Kotlin specific thing there. So you can write Kotlin code that looks like HTML a bit. You can write CSS in Kotlin because of how you like write the extension function. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do with it. You can take any sort of API and make DSLs out of it.
Yeah, I saw that, like the HTML and CSS on that, so that's why I interested to know more about it. Also, sir, I listen one more thing, like we can we have like database driven UI, like we can update the UI from the database. So that type of concept, I want to know more about it, like how it's work.
Is it database driven or like a data driven sort of approach?
Yeah, something like that. Like I am not very much confirmed about it.
Okay, so normally when you want to, I would say, develop apps, especially for like no connectivity or offline first apps, a good, I would say, approach to follow is your persistence. That is, your could be shared preferences, files, DB, anything. Your persistence should be the source of truth. So any information that you require should come from the persistence. If you have anything in memory, that won't be that reliable. So for example, if you think of data-driven architecture, we might be observing, like if you have a list of to-dos, right? The list of to-dos is actually stored in a database. Consider room. Now you're observing room for changes in the database. Whenever a change occurs, you're emitting that change to the UI, and the UI automatically updates. Now here the UI is not keeping a copy of the data and updating it. So you don't have a copy of data in a UI layer, like for example in an activity, and then I'm adding a new to-do. It's keeping a copy in the activity. It shouldn't do that, because the activity and the data might not always be in sync, right? So always try to observe the data from like a source where it won't get destroyed. Like with activities, you can have recreation because of a lot of scenarios, right? Someone changed that like dark theme to light theme, someone rotated the device. So all your data that drives the state should be somewhere that is not affected by any of this. So if it's a database is not affected whether your app is killed, whether your activity is recreated. So always observe from such a point where you can rely on the data, and only that should drive your UI, and your UI shouldn't try to do anything extra to get the data.
Okay, sir. And sir, like mostly people develop application, but there is a lot of issues with performance. Like in small devices, we are getting a lot of performance issue. So like how we can monitor it and how we can make it more better in performance.
Okay, so there are a bunch of tools you can start using. First of all, if you get ANRs, that is the application not responding issues, the Play Store tells you how often you get ANRs on what kind of devices.
Yeah.
And Crashlytics also nowadays gives you ANR alerts. So that's one way of knowing that these are issues that are occurring at these places. So you might know that, okay, for example, if the user goes to this particular screen, I get an ANR there. Also, when you're developing apps locally, in the logcat, you will see something about choreographer skipped certain number of frames. So whenever something skips a frame, that means you're doing extra work on the UI that is blocking the UI thread, and the UI is not able to update as often as it would like to. So that's like the first way of knowing. And some other times you can also, like while using the app, you'll visually notice that like you scrolled and there is a lot of jank, or you switched from one screen to another and there's like a 2-second delay, right? So these are like some obvious ways of knowing. And also there's this thing called strict mode in Android, which you can enable for your applications, which tells you about, like you can configure different rules. So it will tell you if you're trying to do any sort of heavy operation on a UI that you're blocking it, if you're trying to do network operations on the UI thread. So it will tell you that, hey, you're trying to do all of this more actively. Otherwise you'll have to dig in and know. Now, once you figure out that there are performance issues, then you have other tools also to like look into it. Like there is
I think like Profiler is there.
Yeah, there's a Android Studio Profiler which does a great job. You can get a systrace to see where, how long each thing is taking, what's taking up, like what part of the UI layer is like taking this long. Maybe it's taking too long to measure. Maybe it's taking too long to draw. Also, you have something like Leak Canary as well that tells you about memory leaks. Memory leaks is something that's not very obvious to us, so it's a very helpful library. It tells you whenever like any part of your app is leaking memory, and it gives you a nice notification with a trace, so you can use that to figure out that maybe you have you're storing a view instance or storing a context somewhere, and then you're leaking memory.
Okay, sir. So these things I want to discuss with you, and now I am more interested to know about your journey, like how you started everything and now become a Google developer expert. So I want to know this journey.
Sure. So I would say my journey for Android started back in college. So I didn't know
like
what
in
I
which
wanted
year?
to do. So sorry.
In which year, sir?
I started Android end of first year.
What, sir?
So end of first year of college. So that was, I think, 2014.
2014. Approx 7 to 10 year experience.
Yeah, but then again, that's when I was learning, right? I wasn't actively doing as much work that I would call it experience as such.
Yes, sir.
So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I tried doing web development, both in terms of front end, back end. I did a bit of mobile as well. And the only problem was, now we have a lot of powerful hardware. But if you think 2014, 2015 time, getting such hardware was very expensive.
Yes,
so
sir.
I had a laptop which had 2 GB RAM, and I had an Android device that was very old, so it couldn't run anything. So to use an emulator and do Android Studio, it was impossible almost. So I did a few basic apps and then I quit, because I mean, I would click on run, wait for a couple of minutes, something would crash. It was just impossible. So I kept like learning a bit about it, but never really developed actively. I think it's only in my end of second year, beginning of third year, when I actually got a powerful laptop that had like 8 GB of RAM, and that's powerful for that time. So that's when I resumed Android development, and material design was a new thing that time. So I was exploring like how do you animate things. I loved the circular reveal animation that came up that time. After like WhatsApp also introduced the circular reveal, so I tried recreating that. And I just made a few apps, iterated on them, but never published anything. Once I came across this use case where I had to develop a login screen, and I saw that there's this nice functionality where you can show and hide the password in the login.
Yes,
now
sir.
it's available as part of the support library. That time it wasn't. So I created this one small library out of it, because I thought it'd be fun to see the process of publishing a library, and I published it. Got some decent feedback on it. Many people liked it. People used it. And then someone actually reached out to me that, hey, I love the library. And they were running a blog that time. So they asked me if I wanted to write for the blog. And that's when I actually started writing in terms of technical writing for different Android concepts. So I wrote a bunch of posts for that blog. And that actually is what gave me a lot of exposure. So people started knowing about me a bit that, hey, I'm a person who writes about Android, like I do tutorials and other things. And when I graduated, I didn't get an Android job. So because Android jobs from campus placements are almost impossible. And since I was a fresher, that time fresher Android jobs was also very difficult. So what I used to do was, I still wanted to learn Android, right? So I figured open source would be a good way. And I started looking for projects. That's when I saw that Firefox had this app called Focus, the privacy app. So I started contributing to it. Like I would make pull requests almost every day or every 2 days, and that sort of got me some recognition that people started knowing that, hey, I contribute to Firefox and all that. And then my friend worked at a startup where they were doing Android and needed someone. And I had like the kind of modern experience that they wanted because their Android developers had learned doing Android a while ago, and a lot of the practices were not holding up to what they wanted to do in terms of the app. So they wanted someone who had like an understanding of the recent things and see if you can modernize the project. So I joined the company. I worked there for a couple of months, did a bunch of updates for them, fixed things, modernized. And then around that time, Small Case was working on a new app called Ticketing. And I joined the Ticketing team. I was like the first engineer, like Android engineer for that. And I would say that gave me a huge boost in my career because I was working on something alone and something that complex. So I got to write the code from the first like app creation in Android Studio and implement everything. And then over time we had more engineers, like I formed a team and then taking it to the Play Store. So I hadn't launched anything on the Play Store before that. So within like about 1.5 years, I had the full journey of starting something from scratch to a decently complex app. 1.5 years to Play Store, and later on it went pretty good. Like it got, I think, more than a couple of million downloads at this point. And in that journey, I learned so many things, right? In terms of creating own libraries, creating custom views, animations, like bunch of things. And since I was the only one, right, I had to dig deep and understand all of it. And that gave me a lot of topics to write and talk about. So that's when I started actually writing more blogs, giving talks in meetups, conferences. And after that, it's just been like a cascading effect that I spoke at conferences, so more people know me. They suggested I give talks at other conferences. And eventually I figured that, hey, I have, I would say, a good enough credibility in the community to see if I would be, eligible for the GDE program. I reached out to a few GDEs, told them about my journey, what is the kind of work I've been doing. I shared a link to all of my work. And they were happy to, refer me and get me included in the program. And I went through the program. It's a couple of interviews. After that, they just approved it. And one thing I would like to mention here is like being a GD isn't really about like a checklist where you have these things and you do this, you become a GD, but it's mostly that how much you have been contributing to the community. At some point, it's like a recognition of the contribution that, hey, like we can consider you an expert because of all the work you have been doing, all the positive impact you have been having. So it's more of a recognition and not just a checklist that, hey, you do all of this, you become a GD.
Okay, sir. So it's a very interesting journey, like from starting. And I also use the small case application. Like I think it is a trading application. Yeah. So I used it like before some days when I started the trading. Okay, sir. So, sir, like many people start the Android development, they learn the basic and everything. They want to switch to the advanced Android development. So, what you will suggest them, like how they can move to the advanced Android development concept, and what the things they need to learn for the advanced Android development?
Sure. So, I would say when you're developing apps, right, you have functional apps, but while you're doing that, you also know certain limitations. You might know that your app doesn't look as good. Maybe you want to add animations, right? Or maybe you have very complex UI that's coming up. So I would say there isn't like a line between, regular Android development and advanced. It's mostly about how you start approaching things. So if you start like thinking, okay, this is a complex UI, how do I create it? And you start learning about custom views, custom layouts, and all that. So at the point where you start going from what is readily available to start implementing things on your own, you start understanding why you're doing things. That's where the advanced part starts. So there is no such direct way of doing it, but I would say focus on the project you're working on, find limitations of it, and try pushing it. So it could be in terms of animation, that hey, animations are missing, I'm doing animations, or maybe you're using like location permissions, but right now you have like these so many conditions everywhere. It's not flexible. How do you make something that is very easy to use for yourself or the app? So I would say focus on topics you feel that you don't really know much about and start implementing those. Like personally, I was very bad at animations. I could just maybe rotate something and move it here and there. To transitions between two screens beautifully, scaling animations, acceleration, like interpolators and all that, I had no clue. I know that my app looked very basic and I wanted to push it more. I looked into animations, I understood like what every part of animation does. So for example, if you're working on animations, many people just use a default interpolator. But no one, like I would say most of them don't know what that interpolator does. Why are there different interpolators? Like how does it scale across time? So maybe just go into the class definition, look it up, understand why that interpolator is used, what are the different kinds and how do they like, differentiate. That's when you start going into that advanced territory where you're not just going by using things, you're understanding why each of the things work. Similar to custom views. If you were to create a custom view, you can just go into text view and see how text view works internally. Or maybe a material design component, right? Like someone gave you a component like floating action button. If you go inside it, you will see that it's a regular button with a lot of extra properties. You will take inspiration, you will create your own components. And that's what's mostly about advanced Android development. It's not just about, like a lot of people will tell you that you need to know Dagger, you need to know Hilt, you need to be good with Compose, you need to know a lot of architecture to be advanced. That's not what I consider personally. You can use a simple architecture and not go into the advanced Android development category, but once you start understanding why that architecture is used, what are the limitations, what is it solving for you, once you get an in-depth understanding of things in your app, that's when you start transitioning into the advanced category.
Okay, sir. Yeah, sir, in last, any suggestion for developers?
I would say don't get overwhelmed by all the new things that's getting launched. With things like KMM and Compose evolving so rapidly, there's a lot of fear of missing out that, hey, I don't know all of this. So don't be worried by all of that. You can pick these technologies up when you need to do them, and people are not going to judge you because you don't know certain technologies. Most good places that hire will see how you understand things in a fundamental concept. Like for example, life cycles. How good do you understand life cycles? How well do you understand different aspects of your app itself? Like why do we need these libraries for image loading? Or how is networking happening on your app? So whenever you have an app, have a good understanding of what are the things you're doing and why you are doing. If you need to dig a bit more deep, do it. Look at documentation. Get comfortable looking into source code. So if you're having a bug on a certain component, you can do command, click on the component, go to the source code and see what's happening. Once you do that, the rate at which you learn and how easily you can learn new concepts will improve. So it will become a very easy task for you to pick up a new technology. Because once you have a very good understanding of how these different systems on Android work, every new technology is just based on the same implementations. Your core fundamentals remain same, it's just that different approaches to different things. So once you have good understanding of fundamentals and you know how to look into things, rest of Android development becomes relatively easy.
Okay, sir. A lot of thanks to joining with us and sharing your experience and journey. We learn a lot of things from you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this, and you're doing a great work with the channel. So I just was watching the other Android development podcast that you did. So great work there. Keep it up.
Yeah, sir. Also, in future, if we want to discuss about any specific topic, I will let you know, sir.
Definitely, I'd be happy to discuss.
Okay, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
So friends, this podcast is very knowledgeable, and I also learn a lot of things from sir, and I think you are also getting a lot of things that you don't know. So you can also share this video with your friends who want to become Android developer, and also like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe channel for future updates. Also in upcoming days we are going to do a lot of podcast with more developers, so we can share their journey and know how we can become more and more expert in our development. So stay tuned with us. Thanks for watching this video and happy coding.